In the days when the moon still listened to the cries of children and the earth remembered every footprint, there lived a young girl named Fade, whose laughter once danced freely like palm leaves in the wind. Fade followed her cousin Mubwa to a distant town for what she was told would be a short visit, a season of rest and sweet indulgence. Mubwa, the only child of her mother, loved Fade dearly and showered her with kindness, for her heart longed for the companionship of a sister. Fade believed she would soon return to her parents' home, carrying stories and gifts from her journey. But the drumbeat of destiny changed its rhythm. Not many suns after their arrival, it was announced that Mubwa would soon leave for the great house of learning far away. Fade was to remain behind with her aunt, Mubwa's mother, the keeper of the household. At first, Fade's heart leapt with hope, for she thought, "Surely, I shall now receive double the care since I am alone." Yet when Mubwa departed and the dust from her journey settled, the house revealed its true face. Fade's small hands were placed upon heavy burdens. Tasks meant for grown backs were laid upon her young shoulders. Before the rooster crowed, she swept the compound. Before the sun reached its peak, she cooked for the household. Before nightfall, she scrubbed and cleaned until her strength thinned like old cloth. Her childhood slipped quietly away, unnoticed like water leaking from a cracked pot. Though she was sent to a nearby school, where her feet could walk and her mind could fly, the road was rough and the days unkind. Yet school became her refuge, the few hours when her spirit breathed freely. There she remembered who she once was. When her parents came from afar to see her, Fade was kept at a distance, like a secret that must not speak. It was feared that if she drew too close, truth would escape her lips like a bird from an open cage. So she watched her parents with aching eyes, swallowing words that burned her throat. Laughter no longer found her easily. The once bright child grew quiet, her joy folding inward. Many nights, she cried softly into the darkness, wiping her tears so no one would hear. She prayed to return home, but her voice had no road to travel. Books became her companions. In their pages, she traveled beyond walls and chores, beyond commands and loneliness. Knowledge widened her horizon, and though her body was confined, her mind learned to roam. She memorized lessons, discovered distant lands, and slowly, piece by piece, carved a space for herself in the world. She was forbidden from making friends, for it was said that friends were dangerous winds that could blow her astray. So Fade learned the art of solitude. She asked questions quietly, seeking paths back to her parents' home, but each road required coins she did not possess. And so she waited. The elders say that when a child's tears fall unseen, the earth remembers. Fade's story became one whispered among the ancestors, a reminder that not all journeys chosen in joy end in sweetness, and that a child's spirit, when pressed too hard, may bend but never truly break. Each morning, Fade rose before the cock announced the dawn. The stars were still awake when she tied her wrapper tightly and stepped into the cold yard. She swept the compound until her arms ached, fetched water until her palms burned, and stirred pots until the smoke stung her eyes. No one asked if she was tired. No one noticed when her hands trembled. Her aunt often said, "Hard work shapes destiny," and Fade repeated these words in her heart, hoping they would one day become true. Yet sometimes she wondered why destiny seemed kinder to other children who laughed freely in the evenings, chasing fireflies and rolling in dust. At school, Fade's life took on a different color. The chalkboard became a doorway, and words were her escape. When her teacher spoke of faraway lands and brave women, Fade listened as if being fed after a long hunger. Her eyes shone in class, and her teachers noticed her sharp mind, though her body was often weary. The other children invited her to play, but Fade always shook her head. She had learned that friendship could be punished. She had learned that silence was safer. So Fade walked alone. Sometimes, as she returned from school, she passed the old silk cotton tree at the edge of the village. The elders said spirits lived there, listening to the cries of the forgotten. Fade often paused there, resting her head against its wide trunk. "Tree," she whispered one afternoon, "will my roots ever find home again?" The tree said nothing, but its leaves rustled gently, as though it understood. One season, when the rains were hesitant and the sun lingered longer than usual, Fade's parents came again. They arrived quietly, carrying gifts and smiles heavy with longing. Fade saw them from a distance, her heart pounding like the village drum. She tried to run to them, but her aunt's sharp voice cut through the air. "Stand there." Fade obeyed. Her feet felt rooted to the earth. Her parents stretched out their arms, but distance remained between them, distance enforced by fear and control. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she swallowed them. Her father smiled bravely, though his voice cracked when he asked, "Is she well?" "She is learning discipline," Aunt replied. Fade opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She feared that if she spoke, the fragile peace would shatter, and the consequences would follow her long after her parents left. That night, Fade cried until sleep took her by force. Years passed like slow-moving clouds. Fade grew taller, thinner, quieter. Her chores increased as her body matured, yet her heart remained a child longing for warmth. One evening, after a particularly long day, Fade collapsed beside the cooking fire. Her vision blurred, and her body refused to rise. Her aunt scolded her for laziness, but Fade could not respond. For the first time, fear flickered in her aunt's eyes. The village healer was called. He knelt beside Fade, studied her palms, her eyes, her breathing. Then he shook his head slowly. "This child is not sick in body alone," he said. "Her spirit has been overworked." That night, Fade drifted into a deep sleep, and there her story took a turn. In her dream, Fade stood by a vast river that glowed under moonlight. The water shimmered like woven silver. From its depths emerged a woman clothed in flowing white, her hair braided with reeds and wisdom. "Why do you cry, child of borrowed walls?" the woman asked. Fade knelt, trembling. "I have lost my way home." The woman touched Fade's forehead. "Not all homes are places. Some are destinies delayed." She pointed upstream. "Walk. When the river bends, your truth will be revealed." Fade woke with tears on her cheeks and a strange calm in her chest. From that day, Fade changed, not in loud defiance, but in quiet strength. She worked still, but she began to protect her spirit. She hid scraps of paper under her mat and wrote by moonlight. She memorized lessons and dreams. She asked careful questions at school, learning about paths beyond the village. "You are meant for more," the woman whispered one day, pressing a book into Fade's hands. "Knowledge is a road. Walk it." With courage gathered from years of silence, Fade approached her aunt and spoke, not in anger, but with resolve. "I wish to continue my education," she said. The house erupted. Voices rose. Accusations flew. But Fade stood firm. The elders were called. Stories were shared. The healer spoke again. And for the first time, the truth was no longer a cat trapped in a bag. It leapt free. After much deliberation, it was decided. Fade would return to her parents. When Fade stepped into her parents' compound, the earth felt different beneath her feet. Her mother held her as if afraid she might vanish. Her father wept openly. Fade was home. But she was no longer the child who had left. In the city of schools, Fade's determination bloomed. She studied late into the night, earning certificates, diplomas, and finally recognition as a certified social service professional. Her work brought relief to children like herself, those whose voices had been silenced by circumstance. Fade traveled, learned, and helped, always carrying with her the lessons of the silk cotton tree and the river that had guided her spirit. In her parents' town, she met a renowned business merchant, a man of integrity and vision, whose heart recognized hers immediately. Together, they built a home filled with laughter, learning, and love. They had children who ran through the compound freely, climbing trees and chasing fireflies, and Fade taught them the stories of resilience, of spirits that bend but do not break. Years later, Fade became known far and wide, not for her suffering but for her wisdom. She spoke gently but firmly. She taught children to read, especially those whose voices were small and unheard. She often sat beneath the silk cotton tree, telling stories to gathered children. Hardship, she would say, is not the end of a story. It is the shaping of a voice. And when the wind rustled the leaves, the elders smiled, for they knew the earth had kept its promise. Fade had finally returned, not just to home but to herself, flourishing in mind, heart, and spirit.